So, beginning, if you're comfortable, you can let your eyes rest. If you want, you can also leave your eyes open for a moment and just look around your space. And just take stock of yourself right now. What parts of your experience are pulling at your attention? What's feeling loudest in your experience right now? Maybe it's questions or curiosities you have. Maybe it's something that happened before. Maybe it's a feeling in your body. Maybe it's some mix of all of the above. Nothing to do about it. If you're going to do anything, maybe just relaxing a little bit with it. And let's start by taking a deep, deep breath. And a deep, deep exhale, maybe even a little deeper than the inhale was. Noticing the space that air takes up in your body. This body of breath. And breathing in comfortably, maybe a little bigger than normal, but still comfortably. If you like, you can say the words to yourself. I breathe in the body of breath. And on the exhale, I breathe out the body of breath. Perhaps letting your awareness of the breath extend from the top of your head all the way to the tips of your toes, the bottom of your feet. Your whole body is impacted with each breath, so you might think your breath is just in your torso. But your breath, in its own way, literally moves through your whole body. And this can be felt. The best place to start is just with your imagination. Letting that line between what you're feeling and what you're imagining you're feeling be a little soft. Breathing into the whole body. Not more than is comfortable. Only breathing in what's comfortable. And breathing out of the whole body. In a moment, I'll ring the bell and you can just listen all the way until it fades. And once you can't hear it anymore, you can just begin a slow process of coming back. Welcome back, everybody. Okay. Taking stock for a moment before I say too much. What's happening with you? Is it different? Was that breathing uncomfortable? Was it comfortable? Just things to take note of. So, we're here to talk about mindfulness, specifically of breath. And in our conversation beforehand, a couple of people very appropriately, maybe for more reasons than they even realized, mentioned the word breath work. And sometimes there's this very easy dichotomy that I like to make between mindfulness of breath and breath work. And that dichotomy would be that mindfulness of breath is our practice of paying attention to the breath as it is, and perhaps paying attention to certain elements of the breath or paying attention to it in a certain way, but paying attention to it as it is, not trying to change it per se. And often in breath work, we are trying to intentionally modulate our breath in some way, to change it, to change what's going on in our body and mind. And so normally that's a really easy distinction to make. Interestingly, though, in this practice we're about to do, that line gets a little bit blurred. And we might get into today a little bit about what the origins of that are. Traditionally, in mindfulness of breath, you really are just noticing the breath in the way that it is. And that's different from one breath to the next. So it can be very engaging. But also, it might not be as, say, sticky for your attention from one breath to the next, as when you're saying, I'm going to do it this specific way. And it feels very goal-oriented. So we'll get into that. Before we go there, though, I really wanted to start with, why are we doing this? And this might get into the history of this practice a little bit. So if we talk about mindfulness practice, forgive me as I change my screen. Here we go. When we talk about mindfulness practice, of course, that term, mindfulness, is typically a term referring to a word of Buddhist origin. And of course, it is also true that every tradition has its own way of paying attention to things as they are. And there's so many magical, amazing practices. But often this kind of tree of practices of mindfulness, they come from Buddhist practice. And so I think it's really important to really align ourselves with what's the point of this thing that we're doing right now. And so hopefully we don't get too lost in this. I'll try to go through it somewhat quickly. But it feels important to center ourselves this way. So, this word, and perhaps if you want to speak up, you're welcome to. Otherwise, you can just put something in the chat or do charades, and I can look at your screen. But I'm curious if anybody has seen this word before, or if it looks familiar. Dukkha. You're welcome to unmute and say something about what it means to you, or put something in the chat. I'm curious.
I believe dukkha is suffering.
Yes, I can't see who said it because I'm.
It's Terry.
Right.
Yeah.
Terry. Yeah. Yes, that's a very common translation. That's a very common translation. Anybody else want to say anything about this term? Okay. That's a good starting place. And that's kind of a nice setup for me. The word has been translated in a number of different ways. And suffering is the most traditional and definitely the most widespread. And I think that it's problematic in some ways. Because suffering seems like this big thing. It's like this, something that happens when some big horrible event has happened in our lives or another person's life. We think about these things that are not necessarily in our moment-to-moment, day-to-day experience. Really, what this word is pointing to is something closer to a word that some of you have heard me use, which is dis-ease. It's also fun to play with that, obviously, because we're all living with type 1 diabetes, or most of us here are living with type 1 diabetes. And so dis-ease, we know something about, but it's a sense of something is not quite right with the way that things are. It's just a sense of being off. But one thing that I think lights this up even more, a lot of people don't know that the word root of this actually comes from, sometimes people say it's like the wheel of a chariot, or sometimes people say it's a potter's wheel. But something about the axle of the wheel that's spinning is off. And so it doesn't spin in a circular motion. It spins in a kind of raggedy, off, kind of going topsy-turvy every which way. So you can imagine if you're making pottery, for anybody that's done that before, if you're trying to throw pottery on a wheel that's going every which way, your pottery is not going to come out very well. And similarly, if you're in a car and the wheel is off its axle, it's going to be a really bumpy ride. That is the experience that we're talking about here. It's just the sense that it never quite comes out exactly right. Even when it comes out right, something doesn't quite feel right about it. This is what we're wanting to work with in mindfulness of breath, in any kind of mindfulness practice. This is a pervasive part of our everyday experience, whether or not we're actively recognizing it. I found a fun Volkswagen advertisement. So this practice is, we get to trade in our broken chariot here and maybe find an alternative. Okay, one other piece of background before we dive into the breath piece itself and the meditation piece itself. Does anybody know this word? This is like a bonus points if this looks familiar. Tanha. Johnny? I see a shrug. All right. This word is sometimes translated as craving, which is a good translation for it.
Thirst.
But thirst. Yes. So these are such embodied words, actually. So we think of dukkha as suffering. It makes it seem like it's something that's not what our experience is. Dukkha is it just feels like it's not quite right. And sometimes it really feels like it's not right. And sometimes it's just, something is just a little bit off. Our blood sugars are fine, but there's still the stress of having to check and what's going to happen in the next moment. Or, everything's fine in the relationship, but there's this little bit of concern of maybe I need to do something to make sure that things will continue to be fine next. Something's always just a little bit off. And tanha, thirst, or craving, so embodied, right? It's this sense that, if I could just get this one thing, I'll be satiated. And there's another metaphor that some of you are familiar with in the Buddhist tradition of hungry ghosts that have this literally insatiable hunger and thirst. And you can see it's a little bit difficult to look at sometimes, but you can see this depiction of what such a creature would look like. They have these tiny twisted up necks, so whenever they try to eat or drink, they can't satiate themselves. And yet, in theory, and we can talk about this depiction being a little bit problematic, but in theory, they are plenty nourished. It's just that they can't get enough. There's this feeling of, I need a little bit more to feel okay. This is thirst. This is tanha. This is what we're trying to quench or quell with our meditation practice, with mindfulness of breath. So with that as a foundation, we know that something has to shift in our minds. And there's really two directions we can go with that. One is we can settle and collect our minds. And the other is we can train our minds to see things a little bit more the way that they are. That's a bigger topic about what that means, but we actually learn to do both of these through the practice that we're going to be leaning into today. So collectedness of mind can think of as kind of the smooth and pleasurable aspects of our meditation practice, which we will be leaning a lot into. So hopefully, for those of you who said you want to enjoy the breath a little bit more, maybe this is a good opening. This is really what we're leaning into in this practice. As we do that, we have the opportunity to get a different perspective on our lives and on each moment. And maybe we see like, oh, there's that moment where I'm wanting something, but actually everything is fine right now. So you get these opportunities to look at things a different way, or you see the way that a reaction in your body or to a sound or something else that's happened manifests and leads to something else that maybe isn't so desirable, isn't how you want it to be. And these two things are closely related. Not to go too deep into the history, because I know we're limited on time, but there's been kind of a long dialogue for the last 2,500 years in the Buddhist tradition of these two focuses of how to develop the mind. And indeed, actually quite a bit of controversy. It's pretty well understood by most people now that, early on, there wasn't really a strong differentiation between practicing these two things. They were kind of combined. In the last few hundred years, that's kind of shifted. And as with all religious traditions, there's an orthodoxy in Buddhism. And so the orthodoxy kind of shifted more towards, okay, well, obviously what we want to focus on is seeing things more clearly. We're not so focused on just these smooth, pleasurable aspects of collecting the mind. We're only going to do that in so much as it's needed. Essentially, the short version of the story is that led to kind of a major reduction, maybe crackdown is too strong a word, but a kind of disapproval of practices that lean more into the deepening and softening and smoothing of the mind. And so a lot of those practices were lost. Somewhere in the mid-20th century, there was a monk whose name was Nai Bunmin. He's a Thai man. And he had been practicing in a jungle in Thailand. He eventually disrobed and came to the UK. And when he got to the UK, he, still had a passion for meditation practice, even though he wasn't a monk anymore. And he decided to start teaching people some of these practices. And because it was how he was trained, he really focused more on the collectedness of mind part of things. And he didn't have as much oversight by an orthodoxy because he wasn't a monk and he wasn't in Thailand anymore. And so he had a little more freedom to share what he thought was important. And that is the origin of the practice that we're going to talk about today. Of course, there's thousands of years before that also, but we don't have time to talk about thousands of years of history of the practice. Okay. Let's talk a little bit. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, and you don't need to remember everything. There's a recording here. Really, my hope is that you just get a feel for some of the concepts that we're talking about here. So I'll go through this part very quickly. There's a couple of traditional texts that are that talk about mindfulness, and specifically about mindfulness of breath. And these are really good guides for us to understand, like, what's being recommended here? What have people been doing for hundreds or thousands of years? So this text is like the core text of mindfulness practice in Buddhism. And this is, you could say, or it should be, that all mindfulness practices that are, derived from Buddhism derive from, in some way, this text. or in some way working with what's in this text. It's called the Satipatthana Sutta. And it talks about 4 different core foci of mindfulness. And these are 4 foundations or 4 areas to develop mindfulness in. One is the body. And it's not just the body, but actually breathing specifically is also mentioned, which is what we'll be focusing on. But the next is also feelings, and we will focus on that too. So these are really 2 that we will focus on in this practice. And this is not feelings as in angry, mad, sad, happy. This is feeling as in feeling tone. Some of you have heard that term before. You've heard me say it, or you've heard it elsewhere. Feeling tones we can simplify into this feels good, this feels bad, this doesn't feel either good or bad. So practicing with our sense of that is a really important part of what we'll be doing in this practice. So these 2 will be focal points. The other 2 foundations of consciousness and mental objects also will end up getting covered in the practice, and especially as you get more well-founded and solid and continue to go deeper in the practice, these naturally come up. But they're coming up actually anyways. And if there's any questions about that, we can definitely talk more about that. So all of these really get covered in what we're doing. We will put a real emphasis on the first 2, body, especially through the breath, and feelings. Okay. And then, so that one's just talking about mindfulness generally. And you could be mindful about really anything. Again, this is something that some of you have heard me talk about, or you heard Brooke or Peter talk about, or Heather, right? We can use any focal point as a place for our practice. But specifically, if we're going to use the breath, which is recommended for a variety of reasons, there are specific instructions and kind of recommendations of how you do that. So the first one is pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. If you're breathing in long, you are able to discern. You don't need to say to yourself, I'm breathing in long every time. That could be cumbersome after a while. But you notice, okay, this is a longer breath. You're attending to what's happening with the length of the breath. We will be doing the length of the breath a lot. We'll be focused on that, as you'll hear about in a second. And same with short. Okay, gets a little bit more interesting. Now we want to be sensitive to the entire body as we're breathing. Now, this isn't necessarily intuitive at first. It takes some time because you want to be at first maybe attending to specifically the places where you could feel the breath strongest. But over time, we'll also learn to have a kind of peripheral awareness of everything that's going on in the body, and maybe even bring it all into kind of the center of our attention and say, I really am feeling breath through my whole body. So you remain sensitive to the entire body while you're breathing. Then, this is a really, really important instruction. And I think we don't focus on this enough. One trains themselves, I will breathe in calming bodily fabrication. What does fabrication mean here? Fabrication is all of these different formations of what we normally call feelings or sensations or experiences. Not so much the mental ones. That comes in here too, and we'll see that in a minute. But specifically, all of this different stuff going on in our body. Sometimes it's the aches and pains, or sometimes it's like craving for a delicious meal. I'm definitely thinking about dinner after this. Sometimes it's, some mental experience that actually leads to a bodily focus. So as we're breathing, we have the specific intent of, okay, let my breath settle these bodily formations down. Let my breath actually bring peace to my body. And that can be a focus on both the inhales and the exhales. The exhales in particular are a time when the heart rate slows, the nervous system is able to settle. So that could be a really good time to focus on this. Very, very important. If the body is not at peace, the mind can't settle. going on. And this is a kind of more technical term, but this feels really important to mention at the very least. One trains themselves, I will breathe in sensitive to piti. Piti is translated in all sorts of ways, and I don't like any of them. And I think that I'm not alone in this. I think a lot of people struggle with translations of this word. So I've left it in the original language, in Pali. Piti you can think of as an experience of energy, and often it kind of flows upwards towards your head. It can often be very pleasurable. But it's this sense that often comes up as we're settling into our meditation practice. Can be a little bit joyful, it can be a little bit exciting. It's like a little burst of feel good. Sometimes that burst lasts longer, and it can be kind of an extended experience of this feels really good. But it is a higher energy feeling. And again, often kind of rising up towards the head. Maybe this is something that you've already experienced in your own practice, just in a one-off experience. Doesn't need to be a regular thing, but perhaps as you've settled in, you've just had a moment of, this feels so good. Oftentimes people have an easier time connecting to this with practice of loving kindness or sympathetic joy, or sometimes even compassion practices. So there's this sensitivity to that feeling of this kind of initial joy. That is one way that it's translated, which is probably better than some of the others, I will say. So making sure you have this sensitivity. There's this feel good that's coming up in my practice. And not only this joy, but there's this other word, and I believe this is a translation of another word, and I have mixed feelings about the translation, but I love the word pleasure for meditation practice. This is very important. So we're breathing in sensitive to pleasure, which might be a translation of the word sukha. These two are two other things that maybe some of you have heard me harp on a little bit before in guiding practices. And it is another thing that we don't do enough in meditation practice. It has been written for thousands of years now that this is really, really important, and yet somehow we miss the boat on paying attention to what feels good in meditation practice because we think there's some specific special way that we're supposed to do things, and we need to follow the technique and this and that. We're seeing right here that it's been known for a very long time that it's really, really important to pay attention to what's feeling good. I will breathe in sensitive to pleasure. I will breathe out sensitive to pleasure. Critical. And then as we're doing that, we can calm the mind. So sensitive to mental fabrications, thoughts, projections, memories. But not only sensitive to them, calming them. Okay. Getting into the meat of it. We're almost there. So, you don't need to memorize this. This is what we're going to be going over for the next 4 weeks. And we'll have a little bit of an experience of it today. So, the core of this practice, it's really a structure, and it gives you a little bit of room to play within. So you can learn this structure, and we'll work on it together. And then you get to experiment. What does my mind do in these different situations? So someone was mentioning before we started the session that their breath changes when their blood sugar changes, and that can feel a little bit, panicky or scary, which is completely understandable. Maybe 2 years ago, when I led one of these practices, Brooke and I had a really interesting discussion about, she was saying, I don't really like when we do the shortest length of breath, because at the shortest length of breath, it feels like my blood sugar is low. And that always brings up a lot of anxiety and fear for me. And I was saying, oh, that's so interesting. I don't really like when we're doing the longest length of breath, because at that, it feels like my blood sugar is high. And I, really have a strong aversion to that feeling. And so each of us will have different kinds of experiences in this little matrix or this little structure that we're working within. Again, you don't need to memorize this. This will become embodied and understood over the next few weeks. But for visual people, this might be helpful. It's very important when working with these different lengths of breaths that we do what's comfortable. So you'll hear me say the longest comfortable breath or the shortest comfortable breath. And I joke around, some of you have heard me say this before. People hear that and hear the longest possible breath or the shortest possible breath, but that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying the longest comfortable breath. Because the second you start to go past what's comfortable, maybe at the edge there's an interesting place to work, but when you go so much past that, you totally lose your connection to pleasure and joy of practice and to the ease of the body, which we've just read are foundations of the practice. This is how we practice. We settle the body. We tap into what's feeling good. We lean further into that. So there's these different lengths of breath. And then there's these different ways of attending to the breath, which we'll go through a little bit today, and some of you have done already. Counting, and then dropping the count and just following, and then just having one place that we're paying attention to. And then even letting go of that and just having this sense of I'm breathing and it's probably at a certain length, but I'm totally open to what my experience is. So we will practice with and experience all of these. I'm going to skip, this is another reading from another sutta, but we'll do this in a future week. The core of what I wanted to say about in this sutta is that you just let the practice happen. Things arise on their own. And actually, I'm going to go back here. Just the title of the sutta is amazing. I am so into this title. It doesn't say one by one as you make it happen. It says one by one as they occur. One by one as they occurred. Things will happen. They'll arise and they'll fall away of themselves. And so as we learn this practice, just remembering your focus is just to keep showing up and to tune into, okay, how can I calm my body? How can I tune into pleasure? What would be skillful here? So, simplifying this further, at the beginning we talked about dukkha, we talked about tanha, we talked about the sense of like, it just doesn't quite ever come out right. And this feeling of thirst, of just wanting things to be just a little bit different and then it would be okay. This is so important to pay attention to in meditation practice. We learn how to work with this in our everyday life by learning how to work with it in our practice. Learning to calm the body, bring ease to the body. One way is through the breath. There's lots of other ways. So as we feel that, as we experience it, letting go, settling, bringing ease. And as there's more consistent ease, starting to tune into, what's feeling good about this? How can I lean in there? And that will take you a long way. Okay, I've said a lot. Why don't we just take a 60-second stretch break, stand break, and then we'll go into a practice. And if there's questions coming up for you right now, I recommend you write them down so you don't have to be bothered by them while you're practicing. But just taking a moment. I'll ring the bell in a second to call everyone back. And I think my original sound is on, so you might even be able to hear me crack my neck and back. Let's see if I can get another one for y'all. No. It's already given me a lot today. Just checking the time. If anybody needs to go at the top of the hour, I will ring an extra bell at that time, just indicating to you to check out then. Otherwise, this practice will probably go for 20-ish minutes, 20, 25 minutes. And then we can hang around and have discussion. This workshop obviously has gone a little bit over, as promised. The weekly times will likely be an hour. Do you like how I said likely? I'm getting so good with my legalistic language. I didn't say they're going to be an hour. I just said it's probable. Okay, let's practice. I'll ring us in with 4 bells. If you're listening for the time where it's 5 o'clock, I'll ring another bell at that time, just to let you know if you need to go then. Otherwise, you'll have another 10 minutes or so after that. So a nice way to start is just to bring some ease to your experience, however that might look right now. Maybe you see if there's some places you can soften. Maybe you see if there's some thoughts that you're constricting around that you can just let go of, not push away, just let go of. Maybe they stick around, maybe they don't. First foundation of mindfulness, mindfulness of the body in the body. Just notice yourself sitting here. What does that feel like? If you look for something so stable and solid, when I ask what does that look like, you'll probably be frustrated and think that you're not good at this. I can say what it feels like for me sitting here is a mess. It's asymmetrical, there's lots of feelings I can't describe, they're appearing, they're disappearing. Places where I don't feel anything at all. And just softening. Finding new ways to soften a little bit more. I invite you to begin lengthening your breath. Even there, notice what you do. Maybe you're taking in the deepest breath possible and you're breathing really fast. No need. It can be as slow as you like. Can be as full as you like, doesn't have to be full. Just exploring lengthening the breath in a comfortable way. And then finding the longest comfortable breath. Emphasis on comfortable. Yes, it is longer than the normal breath. Nothing heroic. Longest comfortable breath. Already using this longest comfortable breath to bring a little more ease to your body and mind. And gently, we'll attach the numbers 1 through 9 to our inhales and 9 through 1 to our exhales. On the inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And on the exhale, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One breath at a time. Your count might be faster than what I just did. It might be slower than what I just did. Making sure you're in the realm of comfort and ease. And just checking in with your effort. Am I making counting a stressful task? Can I trust myself to count? Am I trying to push away these thoughts that pass through? Can I just let them by while keeping the count and the breath as what I'm interested in, not as what I need to do, but what I want to do? And then making the breath just slightly shorter, so it's still a little longer than a normal breath. And we'll just count 1 through 6 on the inhales. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the exhales, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it could be pretty close to what a normal breath would feel like for you, whatever that means, but maybe just a little bit longer. calming in, easing the body, breathing out, easing the body. Noticing the quality of your inner speech, the quality of your counting to yourself. Does it have an edge? Are you ordering yourself to be attentive, or are you gently coaxing yourself? Are you hypnotizing yourself? And then we'll drop the count and stay at about this length of breath, just a little bit longer than the average breath. And feel the smooth flow of the breath coming in and the breath going out. And the smooth flow is going to be very difficult to find if you're trying to do it right. Just letting this smooth flow of breath present itself to you. Learning to soften your attention. Following the breath from the tip of your nose to around your solar plexus. Breathing in pleasure and ease. Really starting to lean into, is there anything that feels good about this? For those of you wanting to depart early, this is your 5 o'clock bell. Now let's shorten the breath so that it's just a little shorter than the average breath, but still following it. Following it from the tip of the nose to maybe the bottom of the throat, right where the torso starts. Breathing in comfortably, peacefully. Finding pleasure in the flow. Maybe it's pleasure in the coolness of the breath, or the ease of releasing, or of the fact that it will flow and you don't need to do anything. tension will build up in your head, in your shoulders as you naturally effort into the practice. Just releasing that. Let this be a practice of enjoyment. When thoughts come in, you don't need to tighten. When feelings come in, you can let your breath and your heart help them soften. And then keeping this approximate length of breath. It's going to be different every time, but keeping this as a marker. Move the attention just to the space between the nose and lips. A little bit of skin. You might say the mustache area. Try to pick one little spot on there where you can feel the breath moving over and back. The natural tendency in picking such a small spot is to tighten up again, to keep the mind from going elsewhere, to try to force it into a spot. Soften. Let your mind rest in this one spot. Thank goodness it gets to rest in this one place, and it'll go away, and then it'll remember, oh, I have a resting place. And in that resting place, there's a nice breeze. Such a lovely breeze on the inhale and on the exhale. Let yourself be in that spot and just be caressed by the breath, by the wind moving in and out of your nose, as if your mind is resting in a hammock in this area. And if there's pleasure, let it be here. Lean into it. And if there's discomfort, also let it be here and relax. Soften. Take care of yourself. We'll shorten the breath just a little bit more so it's the shortest comfortable. Nobody said how long it needs to be, how many seconds it needs to take, how much air you need to take in. Whatever the shortest comfortable means for you. And if it's not feeling comfortable, just make an adjustment. No problem. And then keeping the attention still in this little mind hammock area. Lengthen the breath back to just a little bit longer. We would call this the shorter breath. And then we'll switch to following this breath in through the nose, down to the base of the throat and back out. And we'll call this the following. This is the shorter of following. And then lengthening the breath a little bit more, so it's now a little bit longer than the average breath. This is called the longer breath, the longer of following. Still leaning into ease and joy and pleasure. And then we'll bring back the counting. Inhaling 1 through 6 on the inhale, and exhaling 6 through 1. This is the longer of counting. And finally, lengthening to the original, longest comfortable breath, and having the numbers 1 through 9 on the inhale, and 9 through 1 on the exhale, the longest of counting. Let your mind be free. And returning to a normal or intuitive length of breath, take a moment to take stock of your experience right now. And take a moment to recollect where you've just been. The highs, the lows, what different places felt like. And I'll ring this bell to close us out, and just allow yourself to hear it until the very end and see where it leaves you for a few moments before returning. Ready, back. So today it had a lot of content. And we explored a lot of different places. And it's just the beginning. It's just like an action-packed trailer that is longer than the actual movie itself. Who doesn't want that? So in a minute, I'll turn off the recording and we can have a little bit of discussion.